Hold on. There we go. It says we are indeed alive.
Oh, jolly good.
Once again, folks.
One more day. Thank God for that.
Let me pull down the old, pull down the...
Don't you pull anything down. This is a family show.
No, I like to log in and just see, what's going on the comments and on the page. So.
Oh, I see.
Welcome.
Okay, well, hello to all my little TeaFlixers. Hope you're coming to join us this morning.
Yep.
And you're all in good fettle. I
Happy
wonder what
Tuesday.
fettle means, Ruth, do you know?
Fettle. I don't know, but it rhymes with kettle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could be good for a limerick.
Yes.
Aha, you see.
Yeah. So, yeah, anyway, we've been slaving over a hot manuscript this last weekend because I'm putting the finishing touches to
her
my
next
book,
yes.
said she,
yes.
name dropping.
Yes.
There are faces I remember. It's all about all the people I've met since I got into my Beatle phase of my life.
Including this wonderful next guest. We're so excited that we're honored to, he's carved out the time for us.
Yeah.
Because he's a very busy detective. And we can't, be too mysterious because it's rolling across the bottom.
No.
But we are really thrilled to welcome, as the crowd goes wild, all the way from Madison, Wisconsin, cheese capital of the world, rock and roll detective, author, and Beatles historian and consultant, Mr. Jim Berkenstadt.
Hello, Jim.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on. This is a real pleasure and a great honor. Thank you.
Well, I hesitated to ask you because I thought you might be a bit, above our pay grade.
Yeah.
So, but you'll mix with anyone, I see.
I may not have your hair, but we're in the similar pay grade.
There you go. What did you say you were when we were talking about hair there?
Follically challenged.
That's
funny.
Lovely. Follically challenged. I like that.
It's my handicap.
Well, hey, that's the only one you got. That's a good thing.
Well, why don't you just say you wash your face a little bit far back?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I guess I have a bit of a mirror too. If people need to see what they look like.
That's comes
that's
in
a
handy.
point. Yeah.
That's great. Elizabeth is welcoming you, and Kenny is watching. We're Ashley from Alabama, Rick Lauthers from wherever Rick's from, England, I think, and Debbie Martin. Lots of people coming on.
Yeah.
And Diana, yeah. So from all over the world, we have folks, and then once this is captured for the world to see on Facebook, we will post it on our YouTube channel so that you can share that to your friends.
Wonderful. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started.
Okay, fine. Well, the first thing I'd like to know is your title, The Rock and Roll Detective. How did that all come about?
Well, it goes back to when I first sort of got interested in digging into mysteries in the world of rock and roll. And that happened in 8th grade for me, when a young man named Paul McCartney had supposedly died, and there were all these rumors swirling around in 1969. And as you know, of course, all the clues on the album covers and turn the record backwards and all of that.
Oh, I know.
So I became fascinated. Yeah, I was just fascinated with the whole concept. And, so I dug into it, and then I went into school early, and I had these album covers, and I was talking to my little 8th grade friends in the social science class, and all of a sudden the teacher walked in, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm telling them all about these clues about whether Paul is dead or not." And he said, "Well, I'm going to give you an assignment, Jim. A week from today, I want you to make a 1-hour presentation to the class about the Paul is dead conspiracy, and then what conclusion you reach, and and why you reach that conclusion."
How
and
very
so
interesting! Yes,
started at a very early age, and then funny thing, in 1976. When Paul and Wings came to Chicago Stadium, because I grew up in the Chicago area, my mom knew the person who was in charge of the stadium and got us 2 folding chairs right by the stage, right by the steps down from Paul's piano.
Right.
Wow.
So Paul and Linda took a break in the middle of the concert and came down, and Paul said, "What do you think of the show so far?" And I said, I'm talking to Paul McCartney. And I said, this is the greatest concert I will ever see in my life.
Oh.
I think he liked that. And it really does still stand out as the greatest.
Yeah, what a
And then my buddy was talking to Paul, and I went over to chat with Linda. And I said, Linda, what's it? I was like, I don't know, teenager at that point, 17 or something. I said, Linda, what's it like to be married to the fake Paul McCartney afterwards? And she just cracked up and thought that was a funny little joke. And so it was it's just a nice time. But all those things, you know, as you're growing up, I just always wanted to research issues about the Beatles and other rock bands.
Great idea. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of upsetting at the time, I have to say. My dad was really upset by it because, you know, you've got the whole world saying one of your children is dead, and you know they're
we know he's not.
Yeah. I never thought of that. Yeah, that's terrible.
And it was just, oh, goodness me, you know. And you wonder where these things start, don't you? Any conspiracy theory, it's like, you know, space lasers, what?
Well, you know, I think that sometimes when things happen, people, and there's not a good explanation from the news media or whatever, people immediately start to come up with their own versions of stories, and they throw them out there. And of course, in the 60s and 70s, it was word of mouth, and now things spread like wildfire on the internet.
Yeah, there are still regularly rumors about all sorts of people who are still well and truly alive here in Hollywood. It must be awful for their wives and their children. Adam Sandler as well. It happens to him all the time. But
I mean, you wonder who profits from this,
don't you? 4 times, and you know, his kids are in school. I mean,
I don't know why people would want to just spread these strange conspiracies.
I know.
But people are weird. Not us. We're very normal.
We 3 are completely normal, and so is everyone watching. Barbara George is saying special thanks to Jim's teacher who gave him the writing assignment. Because, you know, honestly, without starting she or he started you on the path, right?
That's right.
Yes. John, I think it was Radakowski or something like that. Yeah. It was Radachek. That was his name, Mr. Radachek. So he does deserve some kudos.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And here he is on TeaFlix today.
Megan from Rock Radio is saying hello. She had the great pleasure of interviewing you on her radio show. And so, you got a lot of fans on here today. That's fantastic.
Jolly good.
Wow.
So, but now you've also not just written, obviously, about the Beatles. You've got lots and lots of books. But you work in documentary world too. How did that all get started? And what documentaries, you know, from a historical perspective, how do you get involved with those projects?
Well, I think that I think it started really with George Harrison, because in 1998, I just heard that he was working on a new version of All Things Must Pass, like he was going to remaster it.
Yeah.
And I contacted his personal assistant, and I said, you know, we've bought it on cassette, vinyl, 8-track, and CD.
Yeah.
I said, you know, for the baby boomers who will, you know, of course, want to buy it again, let's give them some extra songs. Let's give them some bonus tracks. So George was open to that, and so I sent him the original Phil Spector acoustic demos that he had done for Phil, and I sent him all these other outtakes and alternate takes that have been floating around by collectors long before, you know, people could find everything on the internet. They were on CD. And I think he really liked that, and I, you know, just helped him with that. And then one thing led to another, and then before he passed away at, I believe, his last meeting with Apple, he told them about me. And he said, there's this guy in Madison, Wisconsin who, you know, knows where all the bones are buried, and he could probably be very helpful on helping us with the they wanted to redo Let It Be as a movie and you know, make it more positive, because it really, having listened to all those recordings and tapes, it really is a more positive time than what Let It Be leads you to believe. There's a lot of fun and laughing and whatnot. So, well, I should mention that Ringo said, "Where's Madison?" So I was told what went on in the meeting, and Paul said, "It doesn't matter where Madison is, Ringo. George has Jim's telephone number." So I always thought that was pretty cute. But that was the first thing I worked on, was tracking down the lost Nagra audio B-roll tapes that are really, you know, there are many times throughout that movie, the new movie, Get Back on Disney.
Yeah.
There's just two cameras. So there was A-roll audio and B-roll, and the B-roll had been stolen by a former Apple employee. So I was able to help track down all this lost audio. And then years later, they found, you know, worked with Peter Jackson to put the movie out. But then that led to when, after George passed away, Olivia Harrison called me and asked me to, she asked me to just come up with some ideas of ways we could spread George's legacy down to future generations. And one of the things I suggested was, I said, you ought to do a movie about George before someone else does, because you might not like what someone else does. You should control it.
Yeah.
So she called me one night and said, yeah, I've been talking to Marty, and I was wondering if you'd like to be the historical consultant on this film. And I said, Marty, is that Martin Scorsese? And she said, yeah, Marty. So that was like, I mean, I had a heart attack. I literally had a heart attack.
Yeah.
It was a happy heart attack. And so that was a 3 or 4 year project, and I just loved it. It was so much fun going to New York and looking at footage and digging up whatever it is they needed. And I think that probably led other people to start contacting me in the industry. They see your credits up on IMDb. And so the most recent one was a really fun documentary. It's on Paramount Plus, and if people don't have that, they can just subscribe for a week and watch it for free. It's called I Wanna Rock, the 80s Metal Dream. And being my age, we were, you know, bringing up a family, working every day, very busy. I never really got into big hair, heavy metal music, but I sure did for this documentary. And it's really interesting because it takes you through the lives of 5 people who wanted to get a record deal, wanted to make it in heavy metal. And then, you know, things happen along the way that maybe they didn't expect, like Kurt Cobain and Nirvana sort of brought in a new era of music, which
grunge
affected them, and with grunge and such. So it's a really fun one. So I do get called from time to time to provide historical research. It's fun.
Yes. And is the Metal Dream one, is that about a band in particular, or is it just about 5 musicians?
It basically takes you through the lives of 5 different people who were with different heavy metal bands, like Motley Crue and Poison.
That was my whole era.
Skid Row. Skid Row. And it was fun because they gave me things that I thought were impossible to find. Like they said, we can't do this documentary unless you get this private home movie video footage of Sebastian Bach jumping on stage at a wedding and singing, and that was where he got discovered. And I'm like, you're going to have to tell me who this Sebastian Bach is. I don't know. And
he's the pretty one with the long blonde hair like my husband.
Right, exactly. And with the voice. He's got a voice. So
like my husband.
I looked everywhere for that and could not find that video to save my life. And so I kind of gave up for a couple days and threw it up to the heavens and said, help me out here. So a couple days later, I got a call from Alex Orbison, who's Roy Orbison's youngest son.
Right.
And he said, Jim, I just read your new book, Mysteries in the Music, Case Closed. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I loved how you take us through and solve these different rock and roll mysteries. And I said, oh, thanks. I'm glad you like it. And he said, hey, I have a buddy. He's going out on tour. And could you sign a copy and send it to me and I'll give it to him? I said, yeah, what's his name? And he said, Sebastian Bach. And I said, all right, well, I'll do that, but I need his email. Wow. And so I got the name of the person, that because the production company didn't know where the wedding took place, when, anything, who. And so he gave me all the details, and I was able to get that footage, and it's in the show. So sometimes you get
amazing, isn't it?
That's the universe at work. Sometimes you literally just have to throw your arms up, and as Linda McCartney always used to say, look up. and just, beg for help, guidance, abundance, whatever it is you need. And sometimes when the universe listens, she can do amazing things.
She rocks.
Yeah, the universe rocks. So does God. She's a rock. God rocks too. She's amazing.
Yeah. Now, I something in relation to you when I was Googling you, which of course I did and do. There was something about the CIA and Bob Marley. What was that all about?
So I have this new book here, which I just happen to have in my hand. See if that shows up. It's called Mysteries in the Music.
Yes.
Case closed. Doesn't quite show up. But what I do is I went through a number of conspiracies that were out there, and one of the ones that really fascinated me was, did the CIA attempt to kill Bob Marley? And so I knew that I'd have to find like any CIA documents and things, that they might have on surveillance or whatever, just to give your listeners and viewers a little bit of background. In 1976, the Prime Minister of Jamaica was sort of turning the government into a socialist country. And at the time, our president, Gerald Ford, was a Republican, and of course it wasn't that much that old of a time where we all remembered that when the Russians put their missiles in Cuba and pointed them at us, that whole Cold War thing that got going. So they were concerned that Jamaica would become a socialist country, and the Prime Minister was meeting with Castro and stuff. So Henry Kissinger, our Secretary of State, decided to disrupt their election, and which was coming up in, I don't know, 9 months or so. And he sent down about 20 diplomats, which were really CIA agents disguised as diplomats, to do their bidding. And basically they were supporting a conservative candidate and doing a lot of disruptive things. They were creating violence. And so the two political parties were really warring.
Wow.
More so than even here today in America, where everybody's
is that possible?
But that's just mostly arguing, thankfully. But it was getting pretty violent, and Bob Marley wanted to do a peaceful concert to try to bring everyone together.
Right.
And he had to go to the Prime Minister for permission to use a certain park to have the concert. Sure. And he got the permission, but Prime Minister Manley made it look like Bob Marley was doing this to support his election, and he put at the top of the poster, I'm proud. We're proud that Bob Marley's doing this concert. So that angered the other political party.
Yeah.
So I was able to find. Well, first of all, I asked both the Obama and Trump administration under Freedom of Information Act for the records. And they both had the same letter that said, we can neither confirm nor deny whether we have anything on Bob Marley, which means we do, and you can take a hike.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I then contacted a friend of mine knew Colonel Oliver North, who was our national security advisor under Ronald Reagan in the 80s. Yep. And I just called him up and said, hey, Ollie, it's Jim Berkenstadt, the rock and roll detective, and I can't get these records. He said, well, they've been declassified. They should be giving them to you. I said, well, they don't want them. So he said, well, I think you ought to go to WikiLeaks. And, they're famous for having stolen or borrowed all of our secrets. Yeah. So I went there, and sure enough, I found the records. And I was able to see the names of these fake diplomats, their actual names. Then it had their fake title, like assistant attaché to the ambassador. And then it had their real CIA titles. Wow. So I looked them up and was able to locate some of them. They're in their 80s now. They're retired. Sure. And I was able to interview them directly. I was able to interview Bob Marley's press agent, who was with him the whole time during the shooting, because he actually got shot in the elbow.
Yep.
It's amazing he wasn't killed, because this guy was in the kitchen with an automatic rifle.
Right.
So I get to the bottom of these things just by trying to find either the documents, photo evidence, or interviewing people that know something or were there.
Yeah. Right. Amazing.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, Karen, who is from Edinburgh, but I think he's currently in Liverpool for Beatle Week. He's saying I think Jim Morrison's brother-in-law was also in the CIA. So you never know. Like Skunk Baxter, who is a very famous rock and roll guitar player, is FBI. It turns out he's been FBI all along.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that.
Okay. Allegedly. And my lawyer's tapping me on the shoulder. Allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly blinks on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And people are asking, I've never heard this story, and maybe you don't know, but Karen and Elizabeth Carbone are saying, well, wasn't Yoko's sister somehow involved in the Cuban CIA thing, etc.? So I don't know.
I don't know offhand. I would have to dig into that.
That may be your next challenge.
But there seems to be consensus amongst the crowd with Yoko had a sister, which I didn't even know about.
No.
Yeah, I didn't even know that either.
She so there you go. There's your next mystery to unravel. Yoko's sister.
Right. It's funny. Once you do some mysteries, everyone has new ideas for you that they want to know the answer to.
Of course, yeah. So you heard it here first on TeaFlix. So apologies to Yoko if that's all bollocks, as we say. But it's very funny.
Or crap, as we also say.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. Well, that's a deep one. So what's your the latest project is the Wonder Rock 80s Metal Paramount Dream, but how do you find inspiration for what you really want to work on next? Is it just through meet and greets and going to fests, or do you fixate on something and then just go down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, I think the fests are really where I reveal what I've just done, a new book or something, like The Beatle Who Vanished was very popular about Jimmy Nicol. Replacing Ringo. And the reason why that one, I decided to write about that one, was he was always just a little asterisk in Beatle history.
Yeah.
There, as you both know, and as our audience knows, there's probably been about 5,000 books written about either the group, the Beatles, or solo wise as well. And I wanted to dig into something that I thought people would find interesting. I found it interesting because the questions in that case were, what did Jimmy Nicol do before this, before we ever heard of his name? And how did he become in a position to be one of the drummers considered to replace Ringo when he only had 24 hours? Then I wanted to know what happened. What's it like for an everyday person who, one day no girl's even looking at him as he walks down the street. The next day they're tearing his clothes apart, pulling his hair. They want his autograph, pictures. That's a big shock to your system. And then after you have 2 weeks of that, being in the biggest band in the whole world, and you're touring the world, all of a sudden now you're put back on an airplane and you're flown back to London.
Must have been
that photograph of him at the airport with the BOAC bag beside him is so sad. It says it all.
Yeah,
it really is.
Magic, and now it's over.
It's sort of the classic story of these people who win millions of dollars on the lottery, and 2 years later they're broke. They just can't handle it, right? Because I mean, Jimmy's. I'm quoting from your website, but his story, his mystery, is riddled with blacklisting, divorce, drug abuse, bankruptcy. Leading to many to question whether he's dead or alive. I mean, he literally just vanished into thin air.
He did, and actually, Paul was really very generous to Jimmy afterwards. One of the things that I found very interesting was this was 1965, about a year after Jimmy had been in the Beatles. Paul read a story in the newspaper where Jimmy was divorced, bankrupt, no more band, out of work. It's like, and I think he was shocked by that. So he sort of secretly behind the scenes contacted Peter Asher and asked if Peter and Gordon could pick up Jimmy for either some live dates or studio, and they ended up using him for both.
Right.
And so he kept Jimmy going, and then in the Get Back movie that came out on Disney, there's a very funny scene where Paul is saying to the director, Michael Lindsay Hogg, I don't think Ringo wants to go abroad. Maybe we'll get Jimmy Nicol, as a joke.
Yeah,
and,
I think Ringo was unwell. Hadn't he just had like an appendix or something happen to him?
And and when you aren't that well, you go somewhere else. The food is different, and you gotta be careful.
Oh yeah,
sure, absolutely.
But also, Paul wanted Jimmy to participate in the anthology,
right?
And he discovered that Jimmy's son Howie Nicol was the sound recordist on the anthology movie, just by coincidence.
No.
Good grief.
Wow.
And he asked Howie to ask his dad, and
wow,
he just said, no, he's not interested. So, a lot of people compare Jimmy Nicol to Greta Garbo, who had this famous line, I want to be alone.
Yeah.
Yes.
But actually, Greta Garbo was in a different country, and the translation came out wrong. And actually, she said, I want to be left alone. I don't want to be, all alone. I just want to be left alone. And I think that probably applies to Jimmy's experience.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of his son being a sound recordist on the anthology deal, you also you and Belmo wrote a book that's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the archive in Cleveland, right? Called Black Market Beatles, the story behind the lost recordings. Now, that was in 1994. That was pre-internet. How in God's name did you track all that stuff down?
Well, I can't speak for Ringo or Ringo. I can't speak for Belmo on how he started his collecting, but I started by walking into a store in 1969. It was I really wanted to see these black light posters that were being made then of Jimi Hendrix and all these guys. So I went into this Chicago, I think they called it a head shop, but it was a huge room. It was like the Macy's of paraphernalia and posters and hippie culture stuff. And they had a wall of these albums, and I saw the Beatles live on Ed Sullivan, the Beatles live in Washington, and these were vinyl records that just had like a very simple paste over cover. And so I said, oh, I got to have these. And I started collecting at a very early age. And then I think over time, people who were collecting would maybe meet up at the Beatle Fest. There were usually rooms upstairs that maybe Mark Lapidus didn't know about or something. But
no, sure. Yeah, we used to be invited to many of them and just say, we can't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless those people now because they've turned out to be, quote, historians. But in those days, it was bootlegging and stealing, and we just couldn't go near it.
Yeah. So I was just a collector, and I would just collect it, and then I would do research to try to find out, when was this recording made, who's on it, that sort of thing. And
wow. Just amazing.
That's kind of how it all started. And Belmo probably had a similar background. And so we just wanted to sort of assemble a book that would help guide people. Turns out that later, when I got to meet Neil Aspinall at Apple, he told me that someone dropped this book on his desk while they were working on the anthology, and that it was helpful to them to see which ones the collectors thought were, their favorites.
Very interesting. But it's not, I mean, you're known for Beatles in our crowd, but it's not just that too. I mean, you have a fascination with big band music and the Jimmy Dorsey and Woody Herman era, right? You created a couple of historical albums. Tell us how you discovered if you've lived there a long time in Madison, Wisconsin, how does the whole Edgewater Hotel, fit into your world, and what started you down that road of producing historical big band albums?
Right. Well, so my father-in-law and the man who founded the Edgewater, Augie Faulkner, were good friends. And we just sort of knew about that. And then we found out that Augie Faulkner's son, Scott Faulkner, lived right around the corner from us. Right. And we eventually became friends with Scott and his wife, Lynn. But then one night, my wife, Holly, and I were at this club, and we were just having cocktails, and it looked like we were the last ones there. It was only 8 o'clock at night, but we thought we were the last ones there, and we saw this other couple, and it turned out to be Augie and Audrey Faulkner, who had, founded this great hotel. This is the hotel, by the way, for people who've never been to Madison. This is a hotel where Bob Dylan stays, where Bob Marley used to stay, where Elton John used to play piano in the lobby. All the big rock bands would come through there. But prior to that, the big bands used to come through between playing in Chicago and playing in Minneapolis. And Augie Faulkner got the idea of recording them on the rooftop of the Edgewater and inviting people up. And back then, everybody's in coat and ties, and the women are dressed up to the as fancy as you get. And these shows were recorded. So this one night when we started chatting with them, they said, "Why don't you come to our house for a nightcap?" And we went over there. And then I had mentioned that I had, produced some other spoken word CDs. And he said, "Oh, maybe you want to make a CD of these shows." And I'm like, "Absolutely. Let me talk to the record company." And they made a deal with the Edgewater. And then this was at the same moment, somewhere in the mid-90s, where a company in Madison had invented this new technology for digitally cleaning up bad recordings, or recordings that had, the noise and such. And so that's what we did. We got them all cleaned up and then put them out as albums. And it's just another cool reminder of the Edgewater's musical history.
But what I love about your story and the arc of you as a writer is your natural curiosity and the brand, the Rock and Roll Detective, your registered trademark brand, because you didn't just leave it there with the big band and the Beatles, because then you got into a whole documentary with Butch Vig about Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, Garbage, Sonic Youth. I mean, just all music just fascinates you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. I mean, I have to say, when I got into that heavy metal big hair thing, I was fascinated by that music too. I love old blues music. I was able to grow up in Chicago, so I met Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy and all these old bluesmen. And I don't know, there's something about music that I think, the vibrations or whatever it is, and the vocals just make us all feel better. It sort of takes our mind off the problems of the world. So I love it.
No, I mean, we're very grateful that you have dedicated your career and, both the left side, left brain, right brain part of your, the spreadsheet detective part, and then the arty-farty writer part. You are indeed a rare combination, sir. You really are.
Thank you. Why, with these mysteries, I was a trial attorney. So there you have to get to the bottom of the case before you go in front of a jury. So I use some of those tools. So it's a right brain, left brain sort of thing.
No, that's great. So tell everybody where they can find you. It is scrolling across the bottom.
They can find me at rockandrolldetective.com. If they're interested in the new book, that is musicmysterybook.com. There's also thebeatlewhovanished.com for Jimmy Nicol's book. And of course, the books are on Amazon. And also people can find that I have a Facebook page. It's called Rock and Roll Detective. And I'm Jim Berkenstadt on Facebook. Personally, I'm on Twitter at Rock Detective, Instagram at Rock and Roll Detective.
Great.
So I'm all over the place.
Just everywhere, man, aren't you?
Hopefully you will have made some new global friends and fans today. Thanks so much.
I hope so.
But as our regular viewers will know, nobody gets out without their own limerick, you see.
Oh, yes.
So
one of our monumental, never to be remembered lyrics.
And so Paul Moody will be happy now because this is the bit he waits for.
Yes, okay.
So we usually get it wrong the first time. So give us a couple of cracks. And a 1, 2, 3. Berkenstadt we will not try to rhyme. We'd never get that one in time. So we hope it's effective just to thank our detective, and we'll hope you'll come back one more time.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. I really appreciate it. I could talk to you guys forever. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, anytime you have a new book coming out, just hit me up. We'd love to have you back. Fans are lots of love and lots of likes, and we will be moving this over to the McCartney Studios YouTube channel shortly. And go find Jim at rockandrolldetective.com. And then if you're watching this live, the 29th of August, later on today, Angie and I will be on the Rock and Roll channel on Talk Shop Live, talking about her tour book, Ticket to Ride. So it's Beatle Book Day.
Yeah.
Tell us what website we can go to buy that book, Ticket to Ride.
So if you are online this afternoon, any one of our posts in the last couple of days it's a long Ingram Entertainment Talk Shop Live URL, but you can also, if you missed this and you're watching the playback, you can go to Mrs. McCartney's Teas, Teas, as in cup of tea, Mrs. McCartney's Teas, which is scrolling across the bottom, .com, and Angie will personally sign and autograph books to you or your loved ones. Just let us know the name. And
I've just mailed one to John Bazzini this morning.
Yes.
He's the big Beatle book collector.
He's incredible.
He's another historian.
Yeah.
Yes, incredible. So thank you once again, and go find Jim Berkenstadt at rockandrolldetective.com. And we will see you all hopefully this afternoon at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern on the Talk Shop Live Rock and Roll channel. But until then, next Tuesday, and we will all, stay mad, bad, and dangerous to know.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you so much. It was so great to be on. Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. God bless.